The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today is Thomas Sanjurjo. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Dom.
Before we get into today's show, I want to tell everyone about another show on the StarQuest Network I'm sure you'll enjoy called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at mysterious.fm. That will take you to our website, and you can find all about it. And if you don't know about Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, you really should. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It is a lot of fun.
Yes. And it's more than you think it is. If you haven't tried it out and you've heard things about it, definitely check it out. Because it's just a lot of fun. All right. Before we get into our main topic today, I just wanted to relate another one of my patented Dom's Tales of Woe. I need to come up with like a theme for this. So my
a violin, playing in the back.
That would be perfect. So you may be hearing that now. My daughter has my old iPad Pro. It's a 2019 iPad Pro that I passed on to her. That she uses for a lot of different things, but including she uses it for drawing. She uses the Procreate app and that sort of stuff. She came to me with it last week, like Thursday or Friday, and said it won't turn on and it won't charge. So, I plugged it in, I gave it, half an hour, I press the power button, I get the Apple logo, it comes up briefly to the launch screen and then, the home screen, and then it goes off again. And she said that she was on low battery, like all kids. She runs her electronics down to nothing and then leaves them there. So it was low battery, and then she'd left it unplugged for like 5 hours. So I tried plugging to various areas, and finally I got my MacBook power plug, the Power Brick, the 100 watts, gave it the full juice, and let it sit there overnight. And it started up. It got up to 28% power, and then it started going down again, plugged in, until it went down to 11%. And then it stayed there, and it stayed there all weekend. And I called the Apple support, and they walked me through some things, and they basically said, because I had done all the things, I'd done the force reboot, and I know some of what I need to do. And so they made me a Genius Bar appointment for Tuesday. And so we went in Tuesday, and for one thing, the Geniuses have like special magic access to stuff in it. Like he goes in and he puts in the serial number, and it's on their Wi-Fi network, and he's got another iPad there, and he like goes into one of the menus and settings and then hits this diagnostic menu pops up, and then he taps a button, and then a bunch of stuff pops up on his menu, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. Is that only there like for you? He's like, yeah, it's just for us. Like there's some stuff under the hood, which is pretty awesome. But he said the battery looks great. It was like 97% or something, 98%. It's like really in good condition. 98% capacity. And what we ended up doing was, instead of factory resetting the whole thing, there's a setting in system settings for erase settings, not erase content in settings. Erase content in settings wipes everything out. Erase settings basically clears a bunch of caches that are in the system. And what we think happened was because as soon as we did that and restarted, the battery was 100%. So the battery had been charged all weekend. We think what happened is whatever part of the UI gets the percentage number from the battery charging system, the cache got corrupted. And so it just kept showing the same number. I mean, just when you think about how complex all of these systems are, there's this little program that displays that little number at the top of the window.
Well, and it's funny, too, because it comes back to the point of like, how do they know how charged they really are?
Yeah.
And all it is a timer in there that checks how long it's been on for how much wattage it's been at and kind of refreshes that number. So it makes sense that if it got confused somewhere in there, that it would just keep displaying the wrong number.
Right. So that got fixed. And then my daughter mentioned that to him, that sometimes when she plugs in the power, the cord, it doesn't go in all the way and stuff. He's like, oh, it's probably got gunk in it. And so he takes it out back and he cleaned it up and he brought it back. And when he came back, I'm like, I said to him, like, that kind of reminds me, my iPhone 15 that I've had, I haven't been able to plug a cable into it for months. I've been MagSafe charging it for months. You think you could take? I've tried cleaning out the thing, but I haven't been able to get anywhere with it. And he says, "Yeah, I'll take it back." And they must have like special suction stuff back there. I don't know, but he cleaned it out. He came back. He said there was a wood chip in there.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm like,
it's all that camping.
It's the Scout Dad life, it's the Scout Dad problems. So,
oh man,
just so never be afraid to go to, if you have a local Apple store, never be afraid to go. They're amazing, wonderful people. I've never encountered a bad Apple genius. And they're always helpful, always go the extra mile. It's one of the reasons why I buy Apple stuff, because it's just part of the deal. So,
and if you own Apple stuff, there's no reason not to use that, because the advantage is they know the equipment.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Like if I went to an Android store, quote unquote, I don't even know what I would get. And they wouldn't even know. Like I'd walk in and they'd be like, what is this? I have no idea. I've never seen this thing before.
Right. And I'm sure there are great local PC repair guys, but you never know what you're getting, this is, it was a great experience. So kudos to Apple, that Apple Store employee. So that was my tale of woe, which is now we had a happy resolution. So our main topic, though, tonight is about going solar powered. Now, Thomas, this was your idea. Explain what's happening with you that you brought this up.
So we're getting a new house. We're moving, which is fantastic. It's a much larger house than we're in currently, which is great because 11 people in a tiny little 1,300 square foot house is a lot packed all together. So it's a much larger house. But part of the concern with moving to a much larger house is the electricity bill is obviously going to be much bigger. The ceilings are higher. There's just a lot more space to AC cool. The house we're in is not super efficient, but we don't really pay very much in electricity bills compared to all of our peers either. So we were really worried about that. And then as we were going around looking at houses, we looked at a few that had solar panels. And the first thing my wife asked was anybody that knew the house was, what is your electric bill? Like, what are you paying and how much is the solar helping? And invariably, all the people that had solar panels were like, oh, I don't pay anything. I pay $30 connection fee and that's it. And they pay nothing else for the unless they have to really, really run their AC like super high. Like if they need the house really cold, they'll sometimes go over and have to pay a little bit on the electric bill. But we were amazed. We were like, that's incredible, because these are all large houses and they were still being sustained by a set of solar panels that they had installed. So she's been very much against the idea of solar until that came up. And then she started like crunching the numbers and was like, hold on, it's actually worthwhile to do this. And I'm like, that's what I've been saying for years. We really should have done this already.
Right. So, and I've had solar for the last 6 years. I wrote it down, but I think it was 2018 when I finally got it installed. I have some links to some blog posts, although they may be gone by the time you listen to this because my website is going away. I'm not paying Bluehost for ridiculous hosting costs anymore for a 20 some odd year old blog, but that's a whole nother episode. But I will, I'll try to find a place for these and update the links on the site. But if you get this, as soon as this publishes within a week or two, I have a whole bunch of blog posts that talk about my odyssey through this and the trouble I had, but the benefits. And I want to talk about some of that in this episode. But one of the big things you mentioned was like how where you are, the people that you're talking to almost pay nothing except that connection fee. Now that brings up one of the things I want to mention is the first consideration is the benefits to you will greatly depend on where you live, where your house is at.
100%.
Some of it has to do with geographic, like north, south, how much sun you get. And, how cold it gets in the winter, dark. The further north you go, as we know from high school geography, trying to get the word out, geography, the darker your winters are. And so the less sunlight you're getting to power those panels. But if you live anywhere in the U.S. South, you're probably going to be a lot better off. And then, of course, trees and other things around you. So there's a lot of those considerations. But there are other considerations as well having to do with your utility, companies and that sort of stuff. So I want to go over some of that now. So, Thomas, you're located in where? What state?
Florida.
In Florida, right.
Yep. So right in the middle of Florida, too. So it's very much we're going to get sun all year unless it's raining.
Yes. It's literally the Sunshine State. So
exactly.
So, you probably the only better places for solar is like I've heard like Arizona, New Mexico are and Arizona, especially because of how little rainfall they get. So they get little cloud cover. So I'm in Massachusetts. So for me, we have solar. So probably between about late April or May through October into November a little bit, we get enough sunlight, daylight, to really power the panels for long enough during the day to cover all of our electric needs and then some. And so it really depends. Now that's not a deal breaker, obviously, because we still are doing better than we were or would be if we didn't have solar. So I want to get into that a little bit. But there's also specifics about your house. So, for example, trees around your house, and not just the trees that are 4 foot today, but how tall will those trees be in 10, 15, and 20 years? Those are considerations. I had some trees by my front door that 6 years ago didn't reach the roof line, and this summer were shading the panels. And I actually I took them down because they were getting too big. They were on either side of the front door. It was just, they were too big anyway. I had to convince my wife to do it, and she's okay with it now. But also the orientation of your house. Does your roof, the main parts of your roof face north-south, or are they more east-west? Now, they'll still work with you on those, but it changes the calculus of what you need for panels when you're looking at that sort of thing.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we were looking at with this house is it has a nature preserve behind it with no tall trees. So it's kind of like marshland right behind us, and there's no trees planted in the backyard. So that's really nice. And that's all south of the house. So we have a south-facing roof slope there with nothing behind it that's going to interfere with it. And we're like, that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what we want.
The solar power salesman will salivate at the sight of your house.
Exactly.
And we're going to have some links in the show notes to several different sites, including from the National Institute for Standards. Google has a Project Sunroof, and the Department of Energy, and they all have calculators that you can use. You put in your address, your some other facts about your house, how much you spend on electricity or how much electricity you use annually, and it will tell you what you need for a installation, whether it will work for you. Even like Google uses Google Maps to look at the roof of your house, like your house, and tell you. So it's really good. There's also a link to some software, some open source software called Open Solar, and it's a free solar design and proposal software. I think it's probably mostly a benefit to people selling solar panels, but if you can figure out how it works, you can get a pretty good idea for yourself if you can. If you're handy enough with it, if you're technical enough. So those are the physical considerations or initial physical geographical considerations. There's also some other considerations like the state of your roof. I had an issue when they were installing on my house where there was a sag in one section of the roof, and they had to redesign the installation around it. They had to move some panels from that area to a different area in order to deal with that. It ends up not being a big deal because I had to get a whole new roof a couple years later because of the solar. I'll tell you that in a few minutes.
I was going to say that's an interesting topic. I really want to talk about that too.
Right. So the particulars of your roof matter, and the age of your house and the condition of your roof. if you go with a leased versus purchased plan, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but leasing companies, the solar leasing companies will cover the cost of removing the panels and putting them back when you need a new roof. They will do that for you. That's part of the system. Okay. If you own the system, you're going to pay for that yourself. You have someone take them down and put it back up. You have to consider the effect of solar on your insurance premiums and coverage. So you may want to talk to your insurance agent and ask them about it. And again, that will differ depending on whether you're buying outright or leasing the panels. Now, a big one is the electric utilities, the electric grid. Some states have laws that require a net metering, which means the utilities are required by law to buy back excess power from you and credit that to your account. Now, the way it works for me is I don't have batteries. And I'll get into that in a bit, but I don't have batteries. So at night, I'm drawing off the grid, and in the winter, so when the panels aren't operating, I have to draw off the grid. But I produce so much power during the day that it balances. And in fact, in the summer, I build up a credit so that by, I'd say, I don't think I start drawing on that credit till usually October, November, depending on the weather. And then I usually work that off into probably January, and then we start paying for, straight up electricity in February, March, April, and then it comes back online again. It's the particularities of that winter. If in February, we had a February where I basically had snow covering the panels all month, and I had zero production. So that's no good. So
not a problem here.
Right, exactly. But you got to be aware of things like leaves, dirt, that sort of stuff. You want to, anything that really covers it, even, like a lot of pollen can really reduce your production. So something to think about. So
that's good to know.
Find out if your utility is required to buy back excess power. If they don't, then you'll want a battery backup, even if you're leasing. You'll want batteries if you're buying straight up. I'll just tell you that. But even if you're leasing, you want a battery backup. And then you need to consider the pros and cons of a battery backup. In Florida, where you are, for example, a Tier 2 system, a solar system producing over 10 kilowatts, requires the owner to carry $1 million insurance policy. Don't quote me on that. That's just some stuff I found.
Oh no, that one's one I know that we were having to be really careful about, because if as soon as you go over a certain kilowatt hour amount, that trips you into this system, because they don't want people to be completely off grid, and they want, the energy companies still want you to be reliant on the energy companies. So that's kind of the way that they manage that.
Right.
But so just be careful for this kind of thing when you're looking into solar. Yes.
So those kind of considerations. And again, I think your insurance agent may understand this. And if they don't, find someone who does, this aspect of it. So apart from the battery backup, some utilities in some areas have variable pricing that changes throughout the day, depending on demand on the grid. So, for example, at peak times in the midday when ACs are running hot, they will charge a higher rate, and at night they charge a lower rate. And some people have begun to adapt to that. They'll run their dishwashers and washing machines only at night and that sort of thing. But one thing that people are doing is getting battery backups, even without solar panels, but just charging up the batteries at night and then living off them during the day. Those are people without solar. Now, obviously, what you're doing with solar is you're powered during the day off the solar when the peak demand is high, and then you're running off a battery at night and not drawing off the grid. And so in that case, your cost up front is higher because you got to buy the battery backup, but you're not having to buy from the grid at all in that case. So, so, you're buying from the grid at night, during storms, when the panels are covered, that sort of thing. I did mention, so there's basically two options. There's leasing and purchasing. And they have their pros and cons, and I ended up with a lease. Partly a lease because the lease has lower upfront costs, so as low as nothing. Like we have on our roof, it's Tesla. When we started, it was called Solar City. It was it was part of Tesla, but it had a different name, and now they just brought it under the umbrella. So our plan has a variable monthly rate depending on usage and production, how much we use, and then how much the panels are producing, because that can vary. Even though they say, oh, we're setting you up with a 14 kilowatt system, how much we make depends, again, like I said, on the weather. A lot of it is depending on the weather and how much cloud cover we have. But like I said, with some leasing programs, you get to sell the excess production back to the utility, build up that credit. However, some leasing companies, they don't let you sell it back to the grid. What they want to do is split the power generated, and they get to sell back any excess to the grid, but you then get a lower monthly rate. So for us, our monthly rate that we pay Tesla is less than half of what we were paying in electric bills before. And even in the winter, when we're basically living on the grid, it still balances out overall throughout the year. So, the benefits for my situation was good. So now another thing to keep in mind with the lease, you do not get tax credits. There are federal and in some states, state tax credits for installing solar. With a lease, in almost every case, I'm not certain that every company's the same way, but I'm pretty sure, like I know it is with Tesla, they get the benefit of that. That's part of how they can give you such a good deal, is they're getting a huge tax credit. So that brings us to purchasing. With a lease, they kind of tell you how much of a system they're going to give you, and they base it off of your average power consumption over the last year. They'll look at your utility bills and say, okay, this is about how much you need. We'll build in this excess and make sure that you get an average of at least this much over the course of a year. With a purchase, you decide basically how much of a system you get. You're paying for it, so you get whatever you want. And you get a battery backup system, and you also get, I forget what it's called, but I in my mind I keep calling it an interlock switch. But it's a switch that cuts your system off from the grid in certain situations when you're running off the battery, or you're just charging to the battery. So, for example, when the grid's down, there's a storm and everybody loses power. With a leased system in a basic configuration, we have no power. Even though I have panels on the roof, I've got no power in my house, because I don't have a battery for that to pour energy into. And I don't have an interlock switch to cut me off from the grid. If a lineman goes on the pole and my solar panels are pumping power in, the lines are like water pipes. It'll flow wherever it can. And it'll electrocute a lineman on the pole. And that'd be very bad. So they turn it off. So if you have batteries and an interlock, when the power goes out in the grid, you still have electricity in your house like normal. So that's a big thing. Now, the cons is that purchase systems are obviously much more expensive, and it takes a little bit longer to see the return on your investment for the panels. But in general, I feel like if you can afford the upfront, you're getting a better deal with a purchase system in general. And you also get the tax breaks there.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that's the big thing we're trying to decide right now is like whether and the big issue with us is we're moving into a new house. So we won't have like a year worth of electric bills to look back to. We'll have to kind of evaluate what we're going to need based on just a couple months worth of time spent in it. Right. But we do want to do it sooner than later. So that's something that we're interested in. So this is actually really good information about it. Yeah. I know that the leasing program bothers me a lot too, with the way that it's presented pretty often. This kind of leads in, I put this note on the next one for, be careful of social engineering of these programs. You'll have the guys that'll come to your door and offer to sell you, solar, and they're really pushy, which is bizarre. And then they also have these like really sketchy deals where they're like, you can take a reverse mortgage on your house to pay for them and things like that. And
Yeah.
It's so, just use caution when you're approaching these things. Make sure that you're going through a reputable dealer. There are a few big names that are out there. But we've gotten a link to an article that's about from Market Watch about what to look for. And it does have some recommended solar in there as an ad, but throughout the thing, it just talks about what to be careful of. And it's really reading those contracts, making sure you understand what's going into them. And if you have a loved one who is, looking to go solar, and, they might be older, then, help them out, because I feel like some of these companies are preying on those kinds of people to do silly stuff like reverse mortgage or something like that to pay for these and not realizing that that's very dangerous.
Yeah. Like, don't click on random social media ads for solar,
right.
That sort of stuff. It just, you go find them, you do the diligence and you find them. Don't let them come to you first. That's not speaking of like the guys ringing the doorbell. I've had guys come to my house, ring the doorbell and tell I'm here to, say, hey, if you want some solar power. And I'm like, and I just point up.
Did you see?
I've got panels on the roof. Don't really need it, so I'm good. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
appreciate that one.
That's really good. And I definitely check out this link if you're considering it as a way to be a little more educated on the scams that are out there. There's too many of those. So I wanted to take a little time now just to talk about my personal experience with solar. It's been up and down. More positive than bad, I have to say, more positive than negative. But there's been some serious negatives. So I had some of my difficulties were not with the solar company. It's with the utility. My utility is called National Grid. And one of the things that they said early on was, we already have a few solar power installations in your neighborhood, but your installation would put the transformer over the line for capacity. So you'll need to pay for a new transformer, which could be $3,500. And I'm thinking, I'm not in the business of paying for infrastructure upgrades for major corporations. And then if I do this, then everybody who gets solar after me in my neighborhood gets the benefit without having to pay. And I'm a good neighbor, but I'm not that good, So I told Solar City, Tesla, that the deal's off if I have to pay that. And so Tesla came back, they found out exactly what it was going to be, and they said they'd cover it. So that was good. Cool. But it was going to take up to 6 months to install the new transformer. Oh my gosh. And would you care to guess how long it took to install it? Exactly 6 months. So that's just the way it was. Then the utility dragged their feet on inspection for approval to operate. The panels were installed in April. I didn't get approval to operate till September. I missed the summer. I had panels on my roof all summer, and it turned out that Tesla puts a sticker on the box, like a warning sticker, and the utility requires a plastic placard.
Oh my gosh.
But nobody was talking to each other. I had to do all the legwork of calling different companies. I called like a vice president at random vice president, National Grid. I called the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts and talked to someone there. It was ridiculous. I did look it up in 2015. The standard time for getting that approval from the utility was under 20 days. California law requires 30 days max. So 90 to 120 days was ridiculous.
Yeah. That almost feels like they don't want the power. Like, what is? Yeah,
or they don't want to lose the money from me spending all that. Yeah,
that's really what it is.
Because I figured out I lost probably about $1,400 that summer,
right?
Paying for electricity that I didn't have to pay for because I had the panels on the roof. Now, Tesla also gave me some difficulties with installation. Their installation went bad. When they install it, they have to drill into the roof. They have to drill these anchors in, and they drilled the anchors missed the joists and went through the plywood, and they weren't properly sealed, so they leaked for years. Probably I think we discovered it in 2022. Folks who've been listening for a while remember that there was a period of time in late 2022 where my family, I wasn't on the podcast because my house had been torn apart because of mold from leaks. That was one of the causes of the leaks. Was this leaking down inside the walls, causing mold to grow, and so they ended up having to take the panels off and then pay for me to have the roof replaced. So now, in the normal course of things, they will pay. They will have they'll take the panels off. I think there's a standard, like a number of the lease is for 20 years, and within 20 years, I think they allow for like 2 of those at no cost. It might be 1. It sort of depends on what deal you get, I guess, to take them off to replace the roof. And so if you have to do it more often, then you end up paying. I'm not sure why you would need to redo your roof more often. Yeah. Hopefully you don't.
Probably bigger problems there than just needing to take the solar panels off.
Right. So in that case, we had to take them off. I had to get my roof replaced, and then I had to wait for them to put them back on. And I lost 2 months in that case, June and July of that year.
Oh, man.
Getting them. It's like we had planned to do it in April, May, which wouldn't be nearly as bad. And then it took forever to do. So, so as far as cost savings, like I said before, from May to October, at least my monthly electric bill is $0, not including the lease payment, which is, for me, it's like it usually is around between $120 and $140 a month.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Usually before that, and this is before the rates have gone skyrocketing, like in 2018, I was paying $350 a month or more, sometimes in the summer, because so November to January, the monthly bill rises a bit. February and March are the most expensive months for me. Luckily, those are the shortest months. And in April, the panels start contributing enough to bring electrical costs below the grid-only bill. I do have a new wrinkle, though. Until last summer, all of my heat was provided, this is a Northeast thing. My heat was an oil furnace. So in the winter, I wasn't, having to, I had a forced hot air. So I had that using electricity, but the heat wasn't electric. Now I have a heat pump, which is super efficient. And last winter was a lot less expensive for heat than it was when I was buying oil. So there's that. But it has changed the dynamics a little bit of how much things cost for us but we're still making out ahead of the game. But so far in the summer, the heat pump is way more efficient than our old AC was. So
that's good.
We could have a whole nother episode on heat pumps, in all the things I learned about that, because heat pumps are great. Let me just put it that way for almost everybody, unless you live in Canada or Alaska, where heat pumps are a lot less efficient, but for most of us, it's great. Now, one important caveat: don't ignore the cost of grid electricity, because you will have to be buying it at some point if you are on the grid still at all, if you're not completely independent, with a battery backup and excess production. Some states allow you to choose a third-party electrical provider, like a third-party source of generated energy. So what you want to do is find ones that give you a better deal on the power production. So like my my local utility, I think it's like 22 cents a kilowatt, whereas the one that I'm paying for is like 16 or 15 cents. Massachusetts has a website that lets you compare the providers, which is great. And you also still pay your utility for the grid, for distribution, and this stuff you're still going to pay them for. But at least, in other words, if you're still going to be buying electricity from the grid, don't ignore those costs. Try to get those in your favor as well. So, like I said, I'm going to have some links to some articles and some calculators on this. Is there anything else, Thomas, that we should discuss?
No, I think this has been really good. I think one of our big concerns, and this is my wife's big concern, is the roof situation and whether or not that's covered. So, and it might be interesting. I know that you're leased. And one of the things because I think we're thinking about purchasing, I think we're kind of in a spot where we will be able to afford purchasing when we get to that point. And one of the things that we're concerned about is which companies we can use to take the solar panels off if we did need to do something with our roof. So I don't know if you have any insight on that, or if any listeners do. I would love to hear from anybody that has solar panels, because I want as much information as I can to make this decision.
Right. I would definitely bring that up with whatever salesman, whatever company you talk to, because they may offer to build that into the contract, like a service agreement. So that's something you want to talk about. But I'm pretty sure it's such a specialized thing. I don't know if there are independent contractors out there who would be willing to mess with a solar system and think about it. There might be, especially in Florida, where, again, there's going to be a lot more solar. So one consideration that I'm thinking about Florida, and I'm thinking about hurricanes, is damage to it too. That's another area you want to clarify, again, with whoever you're buying from. Like with a lease, they get to repair anything that gets damaged, but you want to understand what your possible cost would be if you have to replace any panels and that sort of stuff too. So and that could be partly something you talk with your insurance agent as well, covering that. But as far as the taking it off, I would talk to them about it. Yeah.
So what happens at the end of your lease too? That's another thing that's...
So solar panels age, they get less efficient over time. So by the time 20 years comes around, they're going to be pretty old and inefficient. In fact, I'm kind of hoping, if we're still here in 20 years, which is a whole other question, but if I'm still in this house in 20 years, I'm kind of hoping that at the 15-year mark, they're going to be offering me a new deal to keep me on and get new panels, because not only do you want to get new panels, so you could buy them out, or you could start a new lease and get new panels. And I think it's a good idea to get new panels, because not only do the old panels get less efficient over time, the 20-year difference in technology, it's going to be worlds ahead. So you definitely want to get something new. So that's really a big consideration, is if you lease it, it's like a car. At the end of a lease, you can buy it, or you can go get a new car. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Another thing that I didn't bring up earlier was with the lease, when you sell your house, if you sell your house while the lease is still operative, the new owner either has to agree to take over the lease, which I think it's a selling point, honestly. If you sell, if you talk it up enough to the buyer, it becomes a selling point, because they're going to save money. But if they don't want it, you can then transfer it to your new home. They will, like Tesla that told me, they move it for free to a new installation on your new house, and just transfer the lease there, as long as it's
that's kind of cool.
As long as it's a location where they can do it. If neither of those two things will work, there is a penalty built into the lease. You have to pay a penalty.
Right.
So that's something to consider. But I'm at the point where I think having solar makes sense. It makes really good sense, and I want to put up windmills and stuff. I'm like, this living off of the grid is great.
How can I get more off the grid, right?
Exactly. And that's actually one thing I've been looking at is how can I get battery backup? I would love to have where I could have a battery, because my brother has solar and he has the battery. And if we have a power outage, he's sitting pretty. He's got power. His house is running just as normal. I would love to be able to do that and not have to worry about power outages.
Huh. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm wanting to get with it, is that combo pack of having both the solar and the battery at the same time. So we'll see.
I'm pretty sure that if you buy it, I don't think I've ever heard of a purchase solar system that doesn't have batteries. So if that's the way you're going, you're probably going to end up with that system, and that's a great way to go. Yeah, we've got friends on this very network who live in the Houston area who just like lost power for 2 weeks, last month, and they keep losing power every time a storm comes through. They throwing out everything out of the freezer and the fridge every time, and I just
exactly
like people with the solar and the battery, they're fine, So I would, that's to me, it's the way to go. All right. Very so cool. As Thomas said, if you have any questions, but if you have any information or experiences you want to share on anything we discussed about the solar, please let us know at technology@sqpn.com, or go to our Discord server, sqpn.com/discord, to the technology channel, Secrets of Technology channel, and let us know in one of those places. We definitely want to hear from folks besides myself who've had experience with solar. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including Earl P., the G family, David A., Kevin B., and Devin O. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you by Exodus 90 and the Exodus 90 app, a daily companion to help you grow closer to God and to become the man you want to be. This summer, join the Enthronement to the Sacred Heart, the Exodus 90 Summer Book Club, and St. Michael's Lent, beginning August 15th and leading up to the Feast of St. Michael the Archangel on September 29th. Go to exodus90.com/SQPN for a 14-day free trial to the Exodus 90 app and to learn more about St. Michael's Lent. That's exodus90.com/SQPN to join us for St. Michael's Lent starting August 15th. So we have some headlines, and the first headline comes from my hometown paper, the Boston Globe, and the headline is Uber and Lyft AI algorithms brought to light in lawsuit. So what happened, there was a lawsuit in Massachusetts suing, the state sued Uber and Lyft to make them reclassify their drivers as employees instead of independent contractors. And they settled out of court. But of course, in these sorts of things, discovery, the legal process where they get to dig through each other's files, reveals a lot of interesting tidbits. And some of what they revealed, this stuff we kind of knew, but it created a conversation. And basically they told us that they use an algorithm to determine the most profitable routes and to incentivize drivers to go where there is greater need and greater profit, and disincentivize them from being in places where there's less demand and less profit. So it can adjust, on the fly, adjust pay. So, for example, if there's a big Celtics game at the Boston Garden and the game's just getting out and thousands of people are boiling out in the streets, want to go home, Uber and Lyft will create surge pricing in that area, and they'll raise the rates for the drivers so that the drivers know it's a better deal, better use of their time to go there and serve that. But what they also found is that it incentivizes people to drive in rich neighborhoods and in downtowns and less often in poorer neighborhoods. And so there's a justice question. Thomas, just to begin with, because there's some other issues surrounding this too, but what do you think of this? Is this a problem of justice?
I think it's actually a bigger problem of algorithms. And this is I'm reading really interesting book. Just forewarning for it, you have to be comfortable reading a book by a communist that you're going to wrap your head around. But it's called Techno-Feudalism and What Killed Capitalism. And one of the interesting points he makes is about these algorithms and the way that they work, and the fact that we opened up the GPS system for everybody to be able to use. So it's free, it's open, everybody can use the GPS system, but we don't have an identity system that we can use that's the same kind of thing. And the first example he gives, it's such a great example of that, is if you had ownership of your identity and it was an open source system, you could stand on a corner and pop open an app and say, I am here, I need to get to this location, who wants to take me? And you could have your Ubers and your Lyfts that would still tap into this identity system and be able to try and track down that person. But you'd also have the municipal government that could say, hey, there's a bus like 3 blocks from where you are that's going to take you exactly where you need to go. And here's the routes and the times and how to get in touch with that. So you could have a more open ecosystem that didn't rely on these corporations' algorithms running this kind of surge pricing and all of this kind of stuff, where they could still do all sorts of analysis and do all the surge pricing they want, but the market would be so much more competitive because you as a user are not locked into Uber or Lyft. Right. And trying to compete with other users for that algorithm space.
So, because the way that works now is if you want to get a ride, you have to open up a particular ride app, Uber or Lyft or one of the other small companies that are out there doing it too, or a taxi company, but you have to go to the company first, and you basically once you do that, you kind of lock yourself into that path. Whereas something more open, where they're all basically competing for your ride.
Exactly.
You're in the driver's seat, so to speak. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a foundational way of like shifting kind of the conversation, where these guys have benefited from this, these big companies that were able to create the early runs at it. So your Ubers and your Lyfts. And then, we mentioned the other ones because there are some other companies that are trying it, but they don't get market share. And then really, honestly, once you pick one of the two, that's the one you use. Like I'm not a huge fan of Uber, but it's the first one that I grabbed. So I'm not going to switch back and forth between apps because it's annoying enough to try and set up my information in one of them. Right.
No, yeah, it's interesting. It's the approach is really, because what we have now is an approach that's corporation focused. We are as customers, resources to be mined by corporations instead of valuable customers to be competed for. Right. It's I'm trying to think of the analogy is like walking through a marketplace and having the vendors at the stalls trying to compete for your attention to get you to come in and buy from them and offering them better deals. That's what we would prefer. But what we get now is you have to choose a lane, and you're stuck in that lane as you enter the marketplace, and that's your lane. And so they can charge you whatever they want because you don't know what the other guys can offer. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's reading this article. That's what I kept coming back to was, man, yeah, we should really upend the system.
Well, and then there's the other side of this coin, which is the drivers, who are also, sort of cogs in the machine, because the algorithm makes them, basically is designed to maximize the profit of the company. And so they lower the rates, on less profitable, not even unprofitable. And so the drivers have to work harder and potentially earn less, unless they learn how to game the algorithm, which is a whole nother thing that we all are being pushed to do by SEO experts and whatnot.
Right.
We see that on YouTube all the time. Why do all YouTube thumbnails look like a big face making a huge expression? Because that's the algorithm says you got to do. It's just, and so you have to play the game. Whereas, again, put the drivers in the driver's seat and make it less. That's one of the reasons why they want to have these drivers be employees rather than contractors, because it gives them more protection. Because a lot of these a lot of the people who are driving are low wage earners. They're at the bottom end of the scale of the worker scale.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, it's heart wrenching too when you were in an Uber and they forgot to turn off the fare, and so they ended up driving to the other side of the town and charged you for the whole trip, and then you have to go complain to the company to say, I didn't actually go that whole way, and then they want you to rate the person badly, and it's like, no, the drive was great, they just forgot to turn their thing off.
You made a mistake, it's no big deal. Just credit me back the amount that was a mistake. Yeah, it's such an impersonal system. In one way, I've had some amazing conversations in Ubers and Lyfts. You know what I mean? Like I've met some amazing people. There was the one guy from Africa. I forget where. It might have been Somalia when I was in Dallas, I think it was. And he was giving me a ride to the airport from the hotel. And I had been down there for a Catholic event. And we had this great conversation. I told him what he was there for. And we had this heart-to-heart faith conversation on the way to the airport with this guy who I'll never see again. And I still remember it now, all these years later. And it's like, Yeah, so it's a great opportunity. I love that sort of thing, and especially for, if you're an extrovert driver, like if you love people,
right?
But it can also be a lot of hassle and a lot of scrounging.
Well, and it's a way to really save people a lot of difficult situations. Like if you going to a party and you weren't expecting to drink as much as you did, and you can just call an Uber to get home, and that you're going to get there. That's a great thing. Like the ability to have that situation set up is really nice. But
right.
At the same time, I don't want that person to be taken advantage of for me to be able to have that kind of freedom to do something.
Right.
So yeah, it's a tough cut on that one, trying to figure out where to draw the line on those two.
I'm old enough, and I don't know if you are old enough to remember when it was taxis or nothing. I mean, and the taxi industry had a stranglehold on this. Like in Massachusetts, like you had to buy a taxi medallion. A lot of places were like this, like in Boston, in order to drive a taxi, you had to get a special city issued medallion, and there were limited numbers of them. And a medallion could cost $600,000, and they were passed down like heirlooms and traded and sold. And then when Uber and Lyft came, they were worthless. You couldn't give them away. So it really changed the game and opened it up for an opportunity for a lot of people. And I know people who they have good jobs and stuff, but in their spare time they drive for Uber and Lyft a few nights a week, just to get out of the house and meet people and, drive around and whatever, make a few bucks. Why not?
Yep.
So there were pros and cons to it, but yeah, the companies themselves are not in it for the sake of either the riders or the drivers.
Right. And that's these revelations about the algorithms show that they're cutting on both sides. They're making the money.
Yes. Yes. So our next headline is about Google and the Olympics. And so Google I haven't really been watching the Olympics on TV, so I haven't seen the ads, but they've had this ad for their large language model called Gemini, where it features a dad and his little girl, and his little girl idolizes one Olympian who's a runner. And, it talks about how her daughter, is, how they use Gemini for a training schedule for her daughter and stuff like this. And then her daughter wanted to write a fan letter to this Olympian, Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone. And, he asked Gemini to write it. And there's been a huge backlash because, it's a fan letter. It should be written from the heart, not generated by an algorithm,
Yeah. It's QR codes all over again. I hate the way that chat is being abused and even advertised, because, I loved the idea of QR codes. QR codes were such a fantastic tool that never got anywhere near enough traction in our lives the way that they should have, and the ones that crushed me was like you would get a mail and it had a QR code on it, and you would scan the QR code and it would take you to a static website, and there was like nothing happening on the website. And those just bothered me so much, especially when it was like, it's like the dress barn and they have these women in dresses on the front of the ad, but then a QR code. I'm expecting to scan the QR code and see those dresses in action, right? Like that would be a good use of a QR code. Nope, just static website. Here's where you can buy the things that you saw next.
Or even worse, guys. A QR code and a bottle of wine. Like a bottle of wine, especially a good one, will be around for years and years. That QR code needs to stay live for the life of that wine.
Yeah,
like I got a bottle, I scanned it, and 404, link not found. Like, it's just stupid. Well, in this case, like with Gemini, the Google says the idea is not that they would print out what Gemini produced and throw it in an envelope, or in this world, email it to the Olympian Sydney, but that it would be the basis for a sort of a draft of what she could write. Except the ad never says that. The ad doesn't actually show her doing this. It implies that they're creating a letter that she's going to send. And I was listening to a podcaster, David Sparks, and he was telling a story about how he went to a wedding anniversary party, like at City like 25th or something, and someone got up and gave a speech, praising them, and and he went up to the guy afterward and he said, "Wow, that was such a great speech, good job." And he said, "Oh yeah, ChatGPT wrote it."
Oh, no.
Like, are you kidding me? At an event where it's such a personal moment, and you're using ChatGPT, like that's like having ChatGPT write your wedding vows. Like,
right?
Oh my gosh.
But it's such a great tool for starting points. I like where they go with it. Right? They come back and they say, no, we were thinking of it more as the starting point. But I think so many people are missing that. Idea that it really is like, have it draft an outline for you. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been like, and this is the thing I tell everybody. It's what it is it's an inertia breaker, right? Where you sit down and you have a task and you're like, I really don't want to do this. And those first few steps of just writing an outline or just getting some words on the paper are the hardest ones. And you just go to ChatGPT. I have this meeting. I need these things to be stated. And it writes an outline. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is good. And then you can write from there and everything flows and it's really nice. Boilerplate code, same thing. Like, I hate writing junk code to fill in my Python page. And so I'll go to ChatGPT and say, I want a program that's going to do this. And it will write this junk code. It's always bad. It's always terrible code. Yeah. But I look at it and I go, oh, okay, I can fix this. I can make this more efficient. I can alter this. I can add my own. And then by the time I'm done fixing what it wrote, I've started the project in full and know where I'm going with it. Right. And so that's what it's really useful for. They're absolutely right. But the ad was it's the wrong choice. Honestly,
I use ChatGPT every day. And like, for example, just this very episode we're on right now, I would tell you, I don't know what the title of the episode is going to be, but it will have, when you see it, it will have been influenced by ChatGPT. Because what I'm going to do is go in and say, I have a technology podcast. We have an episode where we're talking about solar power and its pros and cons and whatever. Give me a great dynamic title for this episode. And it's going to give me something, and it's going to have gerunds in it and stuff. And I don't like titles with gerund, like, going solar. No, go solar. I prefer action verbs, etc. And, but I'll take that and I'll go, oh, that's interesting. Let me use those. Oh, that's an interesting phrase, and put it together. I do that with tweets. I do that because let me tell you, I do 2 to 3 social media posts for every episode of every show we do. That's a lot of tweets a week for one person to come up with. And so I use it to give me ideas for stuff. And that's a way where I can be the, one guy doing all the stuff that we do. So that's what these things are good for. It's inspiring to start with. I think as we get more used to these tools, we'll start to use them more correctly. It's my hope. And I hope that the companies producing these tools start nudging us in the direction of using them in the way that we should, as opposed to these improper ways.
Creative, this kind of thing. It's one of those where people complain about AI was supposed to clean our dishes and do our laundry, not take over the arts. So that, we were supposed to be able to do the arts and let them do that work, not the other way around.
Right, exactly. Oh man, yeah, putting artists and English majors out of work instead of taking over the drudgery of
freeing up everybody to do it. Yeah.
It's to be like if in the Jetsons, the Rosie, the maid, was instead painting and doing George's job instead of the dishes. Yep. Yeah. No kidding. I want a robot to do the dishes. Yeah. So that's that article. And then we have another headline. Forget Apple. The biggest loser in the Google search ruling could be Mozilla and its Firefox web browser. So in case folks don't know, and didn't hear, there was a big ruling in the Department of Justice basically sued Alphabet, I'm trying to think of the name, Google, in an antitrust case over its search engine. And the fact that it's got this monopoly, which it so-called illegally maintains through billions of dollars in annual payments to make it the default search engine everywhere. They pay Apple something on the order of $20 billion a year, some crazy number like that, to make it the default search engine on Safari.
Mm-hmm.
But Apple may not be the biggest loser in this case because Apple's a gigantic company. And there's another company is Mozilla. That's the nonprofit that creates Firefox, which is probably the major competitor to Chrome right at this point. And they pay Mozilla $510 million a year out of its $593 million in revenue. So like 90% of their income comes from Google for this preferential search payment, search engine payment. And so an unintended effect of this antitrust case may be to make Chrome more a monopoly in the market and not less.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so frustrating to see these sorts of things.
Yeah, especially with Mozilla, which is like Mozilla is really good about being open about this kind of thing. Like I just right now, I'll open up a new tab and I'll click in the search bar, and at the bottom it has this time search with, and it's got a list of other potential search utilities. So it's not like they're like the Apple Google thing. Yeah, okay, fine, penalize them, but
yeah.
It really hurts when it's a company like this that does so much good, and so much of what they do is just they get peanuts for it, you know. So for them to have a deal like this, you can really easily go into the settings and switch your default browser to whatever you want. So it's not like it's a burden
right.
to have them have this set up. But I can see where, you know, just the having the default search engine be Google is problematic. And yeah, I just wish there was a way to keep the little guys fed while we were breaking up these bigger guys.
Right. That's how do you fix this? You know, that's the question is where does that financing come from? Or does Firefox have to become, you know, start selling ads or something? You know what I mean? Or I don't know.
That's the kind of terrifying thing where the argument could be made, though, that they are selling ads. They're just selling Google and letting Google sell the ads for them. So, you know, there's some level of truth to that. And, you know, I'm all for breaking up monopolies. I think it's a great idea. And I definitely would like to see Google taken down a peg because they do own a little bit too much at this point.
Well, in some ways, I feel like these the LLMs could be a way to siphon away some of Google's preeminence because, you know, people start to use ChatGPT and other LLMs as an alternative to Googling something because, frankly, I find it harder and harder to find answers just by typing in the Google search engine. I was trying to find out, this is really esoteric, it's a very New England thing too. In Maine, the largest size legal lobster is measured 5 inches from the top of the eye to the back of the shell where the tail starts. Okay, it's a very New England thing. And I follow this YouTuber who's a lobsterman, and he keeps throwing back these lobsters who are too big, and I'm like, how big is that lobster though? Like, how many pounds is it? Because he never says. And so I wanted to figure out how big is a 5-inch lobster? Like, how many pounds is it? Because I've had enough lobsters that I can guess at how big a 1 or 2 or 3 pounder is. That's I've held them, you know, enough of them.
Right.
And so Google couldn't tell me. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, okay, ChatGPT, considering that in Maine, the largest legal size lobster is, you know, et cetera, how many pounds would that lobster be on average? And it did it. It told me. It gave me a breakdown. It explained its reasoning, which is great. Yep. Which, for those who want to know, it was like 4 to 5 pounds. Just if you want.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. No, you had us curious. So definitely.
I had a 7-pound lobster. Obviously not a Maine lobster because it must have come out of Massachusetts waters. But a friend of mine gave it to me once as a gift, and it was the most amazing gift ever. So it is a myth that they get tougher and less tasty the bigger they are. That is a myth.
He was eating well, huh? That one.
Yes, exactly. And there are bigger ones in the sea, which is great. I could talk at length about lobsters. That's a favorite topic of mine, but I won't. That's for a different show. All right. So those are our headlines, and let's move on to our picks of the week. And Thomas, why don't you go first? What's your pick this week?
All right. So I have recently gotten into the stock market. I've gotten really interested in trying to do some day trading. I know, right? Yeah, perfect. Last Friday, Thursday and Friday was killer. Fortunately, I don't have any real money invested at this point, so that was really nice. That was a definite benefit. But I got started by doing Google Sheets, and I was like in Google Sheets, and I found that there's like this Google Finance thing where you can just say equals Google Finance. You can call up the ticker price and it pulls everything in. It's really cool, really neat. But the more I did that, the more I was like, I hate that I can't write this programmatically in Python because I love Python, and doing everything in Excel format is really, really annoying because I had like these nested if statements that were like 20 if statements long. And I was like, I could write this in one line of Python code. Why am I doing this in Excel? So I started branching out. I started looking at some other stuff, and I found this really great developer first API brokerage firm, and it's called Alpaca. And it's a suite of APIs, but they work as a brokerage. So it's not just stock tracking, which a lot of APIs that you'll find are just stock tracking, where all you can do is just get information about it. But then you have to have like a Morgan Stanley account or some other financial institution's account to actually do the trading. These guys do both. They do both the trading and the API side of things really, really well. And loved it, thought the idea was great, went through some of their documentation, loved the idea. They have a whole section that's called paper trading, and you model all of your trading, but you don't spend a dime. So you can do all of the API calls. You can test out your algorithms. They give you a stock number of dollars that you trade with, and it starts off at like 100,000 just to give you a sense of what you can do. So you can do all of your tests and everything. You can reset that anytime you want to go back to refresh that back to 100,000 and start over again. And all of the API calls on the paper trading are free. You don't have to pay for them. So if you're a nerd like me who's into Python programming and also interested in the stock market, I definitely recommend checking these guys out.
Interesting. Wow, that's. I'm not a programmer. I don't know Python. I wish I did. But the idea of it is a really interesting one. I like the that you can, because speed is of the essence these days with, especially if you're doing day trading. I do retirement IRA trading. That's why when the markets go down, I'm like, ooh, buy. Right. I'm going to start buying some things because I know they're going to go back up again before I need it. But with it, like day trading, like speed is of the essence. You got to get your trades in, and there's nothing faster than an API. So that's really cool. I like that. Excellent. Very good.
And it's not just Python too. So if you're another programming language person, if you like C or Ruby or any of the others, they have APIs available to everything. So I just prefer Python, and these guys came up on my list in looking for them.
That's cool. All right. So my pick this week is the newest version of Overcast, the podcast app. Overcast has been around on Apple hardware for 10 years, at least. I think it's 10 years now, written by Marco Arment. And it hasn't been really refreshed in a long time. And he rebuilt it basically from the ground up using the latest programming tools from Apple, Swift UI and the Swift language and everything. And, Overcast, I've always felt it was the best podcast app. And I think it still is. It's even faster and more capable than ever before. He's one thing that he's removed is streaming. So you used to be able to stream a show without downloading it, but he's removed streaming. But the reason he said, is because of the new problem of dynamic ad insertion. So so there's a little behind the scenes in the podcasting business is a lot of the ads you hear on ad supported podcasts, not us, are inserted based on some characteristic of you, usually where you are, your location within a general area, like a metropolitan area or something. And so you'll get an ad served to you for a local auto dealership or something like that. If you've ever noticed, like, why does this, podcast that's made in another state far away from me have ads for my local car dealership? That would be why. But because of that, it causes problems with the streaming. There's and so he just took it out, which for 99% percent of people, you're not even going to notice because most of us just download the podcast episodes and store them on the device and listen when we get a chance to. He's reorganized some of the UI to make it easier to get around, especially with one hand. I liked some of the reorganization of the main screen. It used to be just long lists, and you had to do a lot of scrolling to get to where you wanted. If you had a lot of playlists or podcasts, now it's kind of grouped in bunches on the screen. You'll have to take a look if you haven't seen the new app yet, but it's really great. One of the features that I use a lot is uploads. If you have Overcast, if you do the premium, if you pay a few bucks a year, you can upload files, audio files, to your website, overcast.fm/uploads, and it will upload it to your account, and then you'll have them available on your phone. I do that for a lot of our podcasts. When I'm editing them, I need to listen to them before we publish, and so that's a way for me to get them in there, and so that works really well. So I just, Overcast remains one of the best podcast apps, and I'm still recommending it if you are an Apple user. It's available on everything. iPhone, iOS, iPhone, iPad, and Mac. That's what I meant to say. Mm-hmm. So that's it from us. We would love to know what you thought of anything part of our discussion. And if you had any feedback, especially on solar power, definitely let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology, the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to technology@sqpn.com. or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You'll find all the links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at starquest.fm/TEC266. Be sure to write a review of the show wherever you can write reviews of podcasts, like in Apple Podcasts or one of the podcast directories. Spotify lets you give a star rating if you want. And share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community and reach more listeners. So until next time, Thomas Sanjurjo, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
It's been a pleasure.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.